Have you ever stumbled onto a truth so big it flips your entire world upside down? I did, on an ordinary Tuesday night, with a half-empty beer in my hand and the TV humming in the background. Ethan Miller wasn't a man of surprises. He lived by structure, morning jogs before sunrise, long hours managing concrete projects across Austin, and quiet dinners with his wife, Lena, whose laughter made every hard day worth it. That night, the house was calm. Rain whispered against the windows. Lena was sketching designs at the kitchen table, eco-friendly lamps made from recycled glass, and Ethan, exhausted, flipped through channels aimlessly. Then came that segment, CNBC's Billionaire Spotlight. A deep voice said, Richard Cole, real estate mogul, Wall Street legend, net worth $12.8 billion. The screen showed a silver-haired man in a navy suit standing on a Manhattan rooftop, city lights flaring behind him. Ethan froze. His beer stopped halfway to his lips. Because that man, Richard Cole, had the same eyes as his wife. At first, he laughed it off. Coincidence, right? But then he heard the voiceover mention Cole's daughter, Lena, left the family empire years ago, choosing art over finance. The room spun. Ethan muted the TV, his heart pounding. Lena had always been vague about her father. A businessman, she'd said, but a billionaire? That wasn't just vague. That was another world. He didn't say a word. Not that night. How could he? Lena hated talking about her past. We build from scratch, she'd always say. No handouts, no shortcuts. He loved that about her. But now he wondered, was her independence pride or pain? When she finally looked up, smiling, and asked, You okay? He just nodded, heart racing. Yeah, just tired. But inside, his mind was spiraling. If her father was that Richard Cole, then Lena wasn't just an ambitious dreamer. She was an exile from an empire. That night, after Lena fell asleep, Ethan sat by the window, laptop open, digging deeper. News articles, corporate bios, stock photos of Richard Cole at charity galas, ribbon cuttings, standing beside presidents. Every search confirmed it. This was Lena's father. And every image screamed the same truth. This man had abandoned his daughter for choosing love and creativity over power. Ethan leaned back, staring at their small living room. The secondhand furniture, the fading carpet, the framed sketches of Lena's early designs. He whispered to himself, she deserves more. But not from her father. From herself. From both of them. That was the moment he made a reckless decision. A promise to himself he didn't fully understand yet. He would fund Lena's dream, no matter what it cost. He'd prove that their life, their love, could stand tall without a billionaire's name attached. The next morning, he kissed Lena goodbye, drove to work, and called a bank on his lunch break. He didn't tell her. He just said, I'm looking for a personal loan, something substantial. The agent asked, What's the collateral? Ethan hesitated, then said, My retirement. Weeks passed. The loan cleared. He funneled the funds through an LLC, found a few colleagues to act as angel investors, and told Lena the business had found small backers interested in sustainability startups. Her eyes lit up. She hugged him tight, whispering, I told you, hard work pays off. Ethan smiled, hiding the weight of the truth. That night, as they toasted with cheap champagne, Lena said, We did it, babe. No shortcuts. Just us. Ethan looked at her, at the sparkle in her eyes, and felt a flicker of guilt. Because now, for the first time, he was keeping a secret of his own. He stared at the TV again later that night, another business headline about Richard Cole's empire expanding in New York, and muttered under his breath, You'll see. She doesn't need your money. She has me. The first shipment of Lena's eco-friendly decor line arrived on a Monday morning. The smell of fresh pine and recycled paper filled their garage-turned studio. Boxes stacked like towers, sunlight slicing through dusty blinds, Lena twirling around with excitement. Her dream was finally tangible. Ethan stood by the doorway, pretending to be calm, even though every box in that room had a price tag attached to his sanity. Each label carried weight of late-night calculations, of interest rates that didn't care about love stories. But seeing Lena happy made it worth it. She didn't need to know he'd risked everything. Not yet. Not while her dream was just learning to breathe. Lena worked tirelessly, designing, packaging, and posting on social media. Her enthusiasm was contagious. Within weeks, her TikToks showcasing recycled glass lamps went viral. Orders flooded in from across the country. Ethan came home to find her dancing around the kitchen, reading messages from eco-influencers and boutique stores. They love it, Ethan. They really love it. But with growth came questions. These angel investors, Lena asked one evening. Can we meet them? I'd love to thank them personally. Ethan froze mid-bite of his dinner. He quickly smiled. They're kind of private types. Just tech guys who believe in green startups. Lena accepted it for now, but Ethan saw the flicker of curiosity in her eyes. At work, Ethan juggled two worlds. His day job supervising skyscraper builds and his secret life as his wife's silent investor. Every paycheck went toward loan payments, every overtime shift toward covering the gap. His coworkers joked about him being married to his projects. They had no idea how literal that was. Then came the email that made his stomach drop. Loan payment reminder, 30 days due. He stared at the number, a reminder that dreams were expensive. But he refused to flinch. We'll make it back, he told himself. Once the next order hits, it'll all balance out. But deep down, he knew he was gambling with their future. Weeks later, a local sustainability blog featured Lena's products. Then a major home decor influencer mentioned her brand. Within days, she was fielding calls from boutique owners in Los Angeles and Chicago. The business was exploding. And while Ethan celebrated with her, part of him began to fear success. The more people noticed Lena, the greater the chance someone would connect the dots to her last name, Cole. That night, as they packed another shipment, Lena turned to him and said softly, You know, sometimes I wish Dad could see this. Not because I want his approval, just to show him I did it without him. Ethan's hands paused on the tape dispenser. He forced a small smile. He'd be proud, he lied. You proved you never needed his world. Later that week, Ethan met with the bank manager, trying to extend his repayment schedule. The manager leaned forward. You've got to be careful, Mr. Miller. If this investment doesn't pay off, you're looking at serious losses. Ethan nodded. I know, but it will. He walked out into the Texas heat, the sun sharp against his face, feeling the weight of invisible chains tightening around his chest. Back home, Lena announced. A New York investor reached out. Someone big. Ethan's heart skipped. Who? She smiled. Some firm tied to coal industries. The air froze between them. She didn't notice his reaction. Can you imagine? They found us. Ethan forced a laugh, heart pounding. Yeah, imagine that. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He watched Lena's soft breathing beside him, the city lights flickering through the blinds, and realized something terrifying. The empire he'd tried to outwork was circling back. Richard Cole's world was coming for them. And this time, it wasn't going to ask permission. The morning started like any other, coffee brewing, the scent of sawdust still clinging to Ethan's jacket from the job site, Lena humming softly as she packed orders. But then came the knock. 3 sharp, confident taps on the door. The kind that didn't ask permission, they announced authority. Ethan opened the door and time stopped. Standing there was Richard Cole, immaculate suit, silver hair gleaming, eyes as cold as skyscraper glass. For a moment, Ethan didn't breathe. The man he'd only seen on TV was now on his doorstep, uninvited, larger than life. Hello, Lena, Richard said smoothly, stepping inside before she could answer. His voice carried money, control, and something else, possession. Lena stood frozen, her lips parted, eyes wide with disbelief. Dad? She whispered, the word trembling in the air like a forgotten prayer. Richard's gaze swept over the room. The thrift store furniture, the boxes labeled Eco-Glow Designs, the scent of fresh cardboard. His lips curled slightly. So this is where you've been hiding. His tone wasn't admiration. It was judgment dressed as curiosity. Ethan stepped forward. Mr. Cole, he began carefully. I'm Ethan, Lena's husband. Richard turned, offering a thin, performative smile. Ah yes, the construction man. The one who thought manual labor was a substitute for ambition. The words hit like a hammer wrapped in velvet. Lena broke in, her voice trembling but firm. Why are you here? Richard's expression softened just enough to be manipulative. I saw your little business in a trade article. Impressive. I thought perhaps I could help. He gestured grandly, like offering a kingdom. Lena crossed her arms. You didn't care when I left. You didn't care when I begged for a chance to prove myself. Now you care because the internet does. Richard chuckled quietly. My dear, success changes everything. Investors notice. I notice. Ethan's pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed don't trust him. But before he could speak, Richard dropped a sleek portfolio on the coffee table. Distribution contracts. Partnerships. Expansion capital. I could take Eco-Glow nationwide by summer. Lena looked at Ethan, eyes conflicted. That's a lot of money. Richard smiled faintly. I don't offer a lot. I offer a legacy. He paused, then added. But to do it right, we'll need a professional board. No offense, Ethan, but construction managers don't belong in boardrooms. The room went silent. Ethan didn't explode, he just nodded slowly. Of course. Wouldn't want to dirty the marble floors. Richard's smile never faltered, but the edge in Ethan's voice landed sharp. Lena reached for Ethan's hand under the table, her grip trembling. After Richard left, the air felt heavier. Lena sat on the couch, staring at the untouched portfolio. Maybe he's changed, she said quietly. Ethan turned to her. People like him don't change, Lena. They just learn to disguise control as opportunity. That night, while Lena showered, Ethan opened the portfolio out of curiosity. Inside, he found something chilling, detailed company analysis, investor tracking, and one line that made his blood run cold. Initial investment provided by Ethan Miller, under review. Richard already knew. Somehow, he'd traced the funding. The secret Ethan thought was buried was already exposed. He closed the folder quickly as Lena's footsteps approached. She smiled sleepily, unaware. Come to bed, she asked. Ethan forced a smile. Yeah, in a minute. As she disappeared down the hall, Ethan stared at the documents again. He realized this wasn't a visit, it was an invasion. And the man at the door hadn't come to help. He'd come to reclaim what he believed was his. The days after Richard's visit felt like living under surveillance. Ethan noticed at first the polite calls from new investors, the emails from legal firms offering strategic advice. Lena brushed it off as a sign of growth, but Ethan knew better. This wasn't an opportunity. It was infiltration. Richard Cole had money, reach, and connections that could move mountains, or crush them. Within a week, his influence seeped into every part of EcoGlow Designs. A new consultant recommended changes to the supply chain. An advisor suggested pivoting to upscale markets. Lena, caught in the whirlwind, believed they were leveling up. Ethan just saw the strings tightening. One night, Lena burst into the living room holding a new contract. Dad's firm wants to invest officially. He says this will secure us nationally. Ethan looked at the thick packet of papers, clauses, percentages, board seats. His throat tightened. Lena, this doesn't look like a partnership. It looks like a takeover. Lena frowned. Why are you so negative about him? He's trying. Ethan tried to hold back his frustration. Because I've seen his kind. He doesn't invest, he absorbs. But Lena was too caught between love and hope to listen. Maybe for once, he wants to help. Later that night, Ethan sat alone on the porch, a beer in hand, the sound of distant traffic humming through the Austin night. He thought about the loan, the one he'd hidden, the one that could ruin them both if exposed. He wanted to tell her everything. But how could he now, when her father was already watching every move? 2 days later, the contract was signed. Richard's lawyers moved fast, too fast. A new board was formed, with Richard as majority controller. Ethan was quietly excluded from meetings. Just business structure, Lena told him. But he saw the shift. She started taking calls he wasn't part of, traveling for pitches he wasn't invited to. When he finally confronted her, the words came out harder than he meant. You let him in, Lena. And now he owns everything you built. She slammed the folder shut. No, Ethan. We built this. And maybe you can't stand that it's finally bigger than you. That one cut deep. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He replayed her words again and again. Bigger than him. Maybe she was right. He had tried to control things, to protect her from a world he didn't trust. But what if protecting her was just another kind of control? The next week, Ethan received an email from the bank, final notice. Payment due. He felt his chest tighten as he realized he couldn't keep it up. The company wasn't paying him back fast enough, and the loan was devouring their savings. Worse, the board's new accountant had access to the books. His secret funding wouldn't stay hidden much longer. He tried to warn Lena again. They're not your partners, they're your puppeteers. She turned away, voice tired. You sound paranoid, Ethan. Not everything is a conspiracy. He almost told her then about the loan, the sleepless nights, the lies, but stopped. Once Richard knew, he'd weaponize it. Days later, Richard called a special meeting in New York. Lena insisted Ethan come, but the invitation was clear, only board members. Ethan watched her board the plane alone, feeling the distance stretch wider than any state line. That evening, Ethan sat in the dark, scrolling through headlines about Richard Cole's newest projects. A quote caught his eye. Family and business don't mix, unless one learns to dominate the other. His blood ran cold. Richard wasn't helping. He was conquering. In New York, Lena stood inside a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the skyline. Richard smiled across the table. Congratulations, darling. EcoGlow is now part of Cole Holdings. Lena blinked. What do you mean, part of? He leaned forward, calm and cruel. It's ours now. That's the deal you signed. The boardroom was glass, cold, and merciless, just like the man who ran it. Lena stood frozen as her father's lawyers flipped through contracts, their words slicing through her illusions. Your husband's funds were the original seed capital, one attorney said casually. Mr. Cole simply assumed control from there. The world tilted beneath her. Richard leaned back, hands clasped, enjoying the unraveling. He meant well, I'm sure. But he misled you, Lena. You deserve transparency. The way he said it, smooth, deliberate, turned Ethan's love into ammunition. Lena's heart pounded. He funded it. Her voice cracked. The lawyer nodded. Partially through a personal loan. Richard sighed dramatically. Typical of him. Playing investor while pretending he's the hero. You see, darling, this is why you need people who understand finance. That night, Ethan's phone buzzed as he left work. One text from Lena. We need to talk. Now. His stomach dropped. He drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past like headlights on regret. He'd known this day would come, but not like this, not delivered through his father-in-law's smug grin. When he walked through the door, Lena was waiting, arms crossed, eyes red, contract pages scattered across the table. Why didn't you tell me? She asked quietly. He froze, hands trembling. Lena, I was trying to protect you. She slammed a paper down. From what? The truth. He tried to explain. How he'd discovered who her father was, how he'd wanted to help her build something without his shadow. But every word felt like digging a deeper grave. You lied, she whispered. All those nights you told me we had investors, all those moments I believed in what we were building, you lied to me. I didn't lie, he said softly. I believed in you. I just didn't want your father to think you needed him. She looked up sharply. And now he's using that lie to own everything we built. The silence that followed was unbearable. Ethan's phone rang. It was the bank. Final call. The words default notice echoed in his mind like thunder. He turned it off. Not now. Not while his marriage was crumbling. Lena saw the look in his eyes. What else aren't you telling me? He said nothing. That was his answer. Later that night, Lena packed a bag. I need space, she said softly. You and my father have been fighting over me like I'm some trophy. I just need to breathe. Ethan didn't stop her. He couldn't. He just stood there as she walked out into the rain, headlights splashing through puddles as her car disappeared. The next morning, Richard called. His tone was polished poison. Ethan, I warned you not to meddle in things above your pay grade. Ethan's jaw tightened. You destroyed her trust. Richard chuckled. No, son. You did that. I just turned on the lights. Ethan hung up and stared out at the half-built construction site before him. Steel beams rising against the dawn, echoing the shell of something that once held promise. He realized this wasn't about money anymore. It was about power and who got to define love. Meanwhile, in a high-rise suite in Manhattan, Richard stood by the window, watching the rain hit the glass. One of his assistants entered. Sir, the transition to Cole Holdings is finalized. Richard smiled faintly. Good. Let's see if she still thinks independence is worth it. Ethan looked at the empty side of the bed that night and whispered to himself. You can have your empire, Cole. But I'll get her back. On our terms. Ethan Miller never imagined walking into a ballroom that sparkled like a diamond mine. The Cole Foundation Gala was everything he despised about wealth: champagne laughter, designer suits, and polite cruelty. He wasn't on the guest list, Lena was. But when he heard that Richard Cole was going to honor his daughter's company that night, he booked the cheapest flight from Austin and showed up anyway. Across the room, Lena stood in a silver dress, radiant but uneasy, photographers flashing around her. Richard stood beside her, hand on her shoulder, rehearsed warmth in his smile. The banner behind them read EcoGlow x Cole Holdings, illuminating the future. Ethan's chest tightened. He wasn't part of that future anymore. A waiter offered him champagne. He shook his head, grabbed a club soda instead. He was here to watch, not to drown. The lights dimmed, the speeches began. Richard took the microphone first, voice rich and effortless. Tonight, we celebrate innovation and family. The audience applauded. Ethan felt the words like knives. Then came the twist. Richard smiled wider. Every success story begins with a little help. My daughter's journey was supported early on by an unexpected source. The screen behind him lit up with images. Lena's garage startup, early sales, and Ethan's loan documents. His name, his signature, projected 40 feet high. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Richard continued smoothly. Of course, some investments are temporary. True vision requires more than sentimentality. It requires leadership. Laughter rippled politely. Lena turned sharply toward him, her face pale. "What are you doing?" she whispered, unheard beneath the applause. Ethan wanted to disappear. He could feel every eye dissecting him. The blue-collar husband who thought he could play with titans. Richard motioned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's toast the future. Led by my daughter, guided by Cole Holdings." When the speeches ended, Ethan headed for the exit. But Lena caught up, heels clicking hard against marble. "You came," she said, breathless, eyes wet. He nodded. "I had to." She looked back at the ballroom. "He used you." He shrugged. "He always would. I just didn't think he'd do it through you." They slipped onto a terrace, the city humming far below. For a moment, the noise fell away. "I didn't know he'd do that," Lena said. "He wanted to humiliate you." Ethan shook his head. "No, he wanted to remind you who holds the strings." She exhaled sharply. "Then maybe it's time I cut them." Inside, Richard mingled with investors, confident the night was his triumph. But when he looked up, he saw Lena returning to the stage. She took the microphone, voice steady. "My father is right about one thing. Success does require leadership. But not his kind." She turned to the crowd. "This company started in our garage. The man you just mocked, he's the reason it exists. Without Ethan, EcoGlow wouldn't have lit a single lamp. Tonight, I'm announcing I've bought back my shares. Effective immediately, Cole Holdings no longer owns my dream." The room fell silent, then erupted in scattered applause, first hesitant, then genuine. Richard's expression hardened, pride cracking into fury. But Lena didn't stay to see it. She walked off stage straight into Ethan's arms. Outside, they stood beneath the city lights, the cold biting but liberating. "You just declared war on him," Ethan said quietly. She smiled through tears. "Then I guess we will fight together this time." He laughed, holding her tighter. For the first time in months, the world felt honest again. But far above, in a corner window of the skyscraper, Richard watched them leave. His face was unreadable, except for the flicker of something between pride and vengeance. He poured another drink and muttered, "Let's see how long love lasts without leverage." 3 days after the gala, the world seemed brighter. Ethan and Lena were back in Austin, coffee mugs in hand, sunlight flooding their kitchen. For a moment, it felt like life had forgiven them. They had no empire, no investors, just each other. But peace built on defiance never lasts long. Lena smiled, scrolling through her phone. "The video's everywhere," she said. "People are calling me brave." Ethan grinned faintly. "You were brave." But the phone buzzed again, her supplier. Then her accountant. Then her attorney. Every voice said the same thing. Contracts suspended, payments delayed, distributors withdrawing. Richard Cole had started pulling strings by noon. Her inbox was a graveyard of cancellations. "He's blacklisting us," Ethan said quietly. Lena's hands trembled as she stared at the screen. He wouldn't destroy his own daughter's business. Ethan met her eyes. "He doesn't see it as destruction, Lena. He sees it as a correction." They drove to the small warehouse that had once hummed with energy. Now it was silent. Orders had vanished, trucks were gone, and the workers stood around uncertainly. Lena walked among them, voice cracking as she tried to stay calm. "We'll fix this," she said. "We'll find new partners." Ethan could hear the disbelief in her own words. That evening, Ethan found a letter waiting on the porch, official, thick, cruelly neat. Inside was a foreclosure notice from the bank. The loan had defaulted. He sat on the steps, letter shaking in his hands, the streetlight flickering above like an interrogation lamp. When Lena found him, he couldn't hide it anymore. He handed her the letter, his voice barely steady. "It's my fault. The loan, the one I used to fund everything, it's collapsing." She sank beside him, the letter trembling between her fingers. "So we're broke." He nodded. "Worse. We're visible. He'll know exactly when we fall." For the next week, they scrambled, calls, pitches, meetings with anyone who would listen. But every door shut faster than the last. Every potential investor regretted to inform them. Richard's reach was invisible but absolute. He didn't need to shout. The world obeyed his silence. One night, exhaustion broke them. "We can't win this way," Lena said. "He'll keep tightening until we suffocate." Ethan nodded. "Then maybe we stop fighting on his terms." He spread out old notebooks, their first designs, plans from before investors and contracts. We rebuilt small. Quietly. No lawyers. No boards. The next morning, a surprise arrived. A thick envelope, no return address. Inside was a single check, $250,000, with a note that read, "For your next beginning." R. Lena stared at it, hand trembling. He's trying to buy his way back. Ethan exhaled slowly. Or trap us again. She looked at him. What if we take it? He shook his head. Then he owns the next beginning, too. She tore the check clean in half. Then we start broke, but free. It wasn't triumph. It was defiance wrapped in exhaustion. But for the first time, Ethan saw the woman who had once turned down $1 billion inheritance for a dream. That night, they returned to the garage where it all began. The smell of sawdust and varnish lingered in the air. Lena whispered, "Maybe the empire wins the market. But we'll win something he never will, peace." Ethan smiled. Let's build the quiet life loud enough for him to hear. Miles away, in his Manhattan penthouse, Richard poured another glass of whiskey and stared out over the skyline. His assistant approached. "Their business is finished, sir." He didn't smile. "So was mine once," he murmured. "Until I decided never to lose again." The glass clinked as he raised it to the window. Let's see if they can say the same. The nights were quieter now. The house echoed differently without deliveries, without conference calls, without the hum of success. Ethan and Lena had traded noise for clarity. They worked from their garage again, sanding wood, mixing eco-friendly paints by hand. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Lena traced a brush over a handcrafted lamp base. "Remember when we dreamed of this?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, smiling. "Back then, we thought we had to prove ourselves. Now we just have to be ourselves." For a moment, peace flickered between them like candlelight, fragile, but real. But peace doesn't pay bills. The foreclosure notice sat taped to the fridge, a silent countdown. They had 30 days before the bank took the house. "We need one miracle," Ethan said. Lena replied, "We'll make one." She opened her sketchbook and drew a design, sleek, modern, renewable. Something different. Something viral. They poured the last of their savings into it. A new line of solar-lit decor designed for small spaces. No investors. No marketing team. Just the two of them, posting prototypes on TikTok and shipping orders by hand. Slowly, the views grew. Comments poured in. A new story was spreading. The couple who defied a billionaire. Weeks later, an email came from a boutique design festival in Seattle. "We'd love to feature your work." Lena gasped. "Ethan, they found us." It wasn't money, but it was exposure. "We'll drive there," Ethan said. No flights, no hotels. Just us and the road. The drive was long, miles of open highway, gas station coffee, and shared silence. "Somewhere near Colorado," Lena whispered. "He's still watching, you know." Ethan didn't deny it. He'd noticed odd phone calls, canceled card transactions, too many errors to be random. Richard Cole wasn't finished. When they reached Seattle, the festival buzzed with creativity. Handmade designs, recycled art, sustainable innovation, the kind of world Lena belonged to. Their booth was small, but it drew crowds. Bloggers asked questions, cameras clicked, and the story of EcoGlow Reborn began to trend. That night, as they celebrated with cheap champagne in a motel room, the TV flickered on with breaking news. Cole Holdings announces new green living division. The promo clip showed sleek designs suspiciously similar to Lena's. Richard Cole was back in the game, and stealing theirs. Lena's hands shook. "He took it again," she whispered. Ethan's fists clenched. "Not this time." He opened his laptop, typing furiously. He can't copyright what he stole in plain sight. But when he checked the trademark filings, Richard had already beaten them by 3 days. Lena sank onto the bed, defeated. "We can't win against him legally. He owns everything." Ethan sat beside her, voice steady but fierce. "Then we don't fight him in court. We fight him in truth." He turned the laptop toward her, showing the festival footage going viral online. Let the world see who made it first. The next morning, hashtags began to trend. Hashtag EcoGlowOrigin, hashtag designed by Lena. Bloggers compared her prototypes to Richard's corporate releases. Comments exploded with outrage. He stole his daughter's designs. By evening, news anchors were calling it a PR nightmare for Cole Holdings. In Manhattan, Richard watched it unfold from his office, expression unreadable. "They're playing the sympathy card," his assistant said. Richard smiled faintly. "No, they're playing with fire." He turned to the window, city lights reflecting off his glass. "And I intend to burn brighter." Meanwhile in Seattle, a buyer from a major eco-retail chain approached Lena. "We want your line," she said. "And we'll pay up front." Lena's breath caught. Ethan squeezed her hand. The Empire had underestimated them, again. The media storm hit Manhattan like a hurricane. Cole Steele's daughter's designs screamed across headlines. TV hosts debated whether it was corporate strategy or personal betrayal. To the public, Richard Cole looked like a man who had built his fortune on his own child's back. And for the first time, the great Wall Street titan flinched. Diane Austin. Ethan and Lena watched the chaos unfold from their living room, barely daring to breathe. Their orders had tripled overnight. Reporters wanted interviews. A late-night host even joked, "Turns out Karma's a minimalist eco-brand." But for Ethan, victory didn't feel safe. "He won't let this stand," he said quietly. Lena nodded. "Then let him come." 2 days later, he did. A black limousine rolled up the gravel driveway just after dawn. Richard Cole stepped out, no entourage this time, no photographers, just a father armed with fury. The sight of him against the backdrop of their small Texas home was almost surreal, like a wolf standing in a field of lambs. Lena opened the door before Ethan could stop her. "So you decided to visit the peasants?" she said, voice trembling only slightly. Richard smirked. "You've done well for yourself, at least until the lawsuits start." Ethan stepped between them. "This isn't your world anymore." Richard's gaze cut to him like a blade. "Everything is my world, son." They sat at the kitchen table, tension thick enough to taste. "I didn't come to fight," Richard said, his tone calculated calmly. "I came to offer peace." He slid a folder across the table, legal documents. "A partnership. Cole Holdings will absorb EcoGlow and pay you both handsomely. In exchange, I control operations." Lena stared at the contract like it was poison. "You humiliated my husband. You sabotaged my work. And now you want to own me again." Richard's voice softened. "I want to protect you. The world is cruel. You're making enemies you can't see." Ethan leaned forward. "No, she's just finally seeing you." Richard stood. "You think this little victory online will last? Public sympathy fades. Money doesn't." He turned toward Lena. "You are my daughter. And like it or not, that name, my name, is your currency." Lena's reply was sharp as glass. "Then I'll file for bankruptcy in pride." For a long moment, Richard just looked at her. Not as a billionaire, not as a manipulator, but as a father realizing he'd lost his child for good. "You've chosen him over everything I built," he said finally. Lena's voice softened. "No, I chose me." He left without another word, the limo vanishing down the road. Ethan exhaled slowly, tension leaving his body like steam. But Lena's eyes lingered on the empty driveway. "It's not over," she whispered. "He'll come back harder." Ethan nodded. "Then we'll be ready." That night, the attack came, not with lawyers, but with headlines. EcoGlow Designs under investigation for patent infringement. Ethan's stomach dropped. The claims were false, but Richard's influence made truth irrelevant. Their accounts froze again. Orders halted. Everything was collapsing, again. Lena slammed the laptop shut. "He's trying to erase us." Ethan grabbed her shoulders. "Then we stop reacting. We go after him." She blinked. "How?" His eyes hardened. "By showing everyone who he really is." The next morning, Ethan packed a bag. "I'm going to New York," he said. "He started this war there. That's where it ends." Lena grabbed his hand. "Then I'm coming too." Ethan hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I wouldn't dare stop you." They drove toward the airport, the Texas horizon fading behind them. Ahead waited the city that had broken their hearts, and the man who still held the power to ruin them. But this time, they weren't going to plead. They were going to expose him. The plane descended through gray Manhattan clouds, slicing into the skyline like a warning. Ethan and Lena hadn't spoken for most of the flight. They didn't need to. The silence between them was full of strategy, fear, and unspoken resolve. They were flying straight into the lion's den, with nothing left to lose. The city greeted them like a challenge, sleek, merciless, and familiar in all the wrong ways. They checked into a small midtown hotel, the kind where the wallpaper was tired, but the locks were trustworthy. Lena stood by the window, watching taxis crawl below. He's not just fighting us, Ethan, she said. He's protecting something. That night, Ethan met with someone he'd contacted days earlier, a former Cole Holdings accountant named Daniel Reyes. Nervous, fidgeting, Daniel slid a flash drive across the table at a diner. You didn't get this from me, he whispered. But it'll show you why your father-in-law burns every bridge he crosses. When Ethan and Lena plugged in the drive, files opened, emails, transfers, board memos. One folder stopped them cold. Project Air. It contained years of correspondence between Richard and a private clinic in Switzerland. Lena's breath caught. That's my mother's name. She opened the file, and her hands began to shake. Her mother hadn't died of illness, as Richard claimed. She'd left, run away, funded by hidden accounts, escaping his control. The inheritance fund Richard had cut Lena off from wasn't punishment, it was bait. Money meant to keep her loyal, trapped, predictable. He didn't lose my mom, Lena whispered. He drove her away. Ethan stared at the screen. He built an empire out of fear, he said quietly. Control's all he's ever loved. Lena closed the laptop slowly. Then maybe it's time we take away the one thing he can't control, his story. The next morning, they walked straight into Cole Holdings' marble lobby, unannounced. Security hesitated. No one expected the outcasts to return. Tell Richard his daughter's here, Lena said firmly. They were escorted up 40 floors in silence, the hum of the elevator like a countdown. When the doors opened, Richard was waiting. No smile, no mask. You shouldn't have come, he said. Lena placed the flash drive on his desk. You shouldn't have lied. He glanced at it, expression unreadable. So you finally found the skeletons. And what will you do? Ruin your family name? Lena stepped closer. You built this company on fear and silence. You broke my mother. You tried to break me. But fear doesn't build legacy, Dad, it buries it. For the first time, Richard's voice cracked. You think you understand? She didn't leave because of me. She left because she couldn't face you, the part of her that wanted out. Ethan stepped forward. You're wrong. She left because you forgot what love was supposed to feel like. Richard's gaze shifted to him, eyes dark. And what would you know about love? You bought it with loans and lies. Ethan didn't flinch. Maybe, but I never tried to own it. Silence filled the room. Then Lena pulled out her phone, recording. We're not hiding anymore, she said. The world deserves to know who Richard Cole really is. He stared at her, realization dawning. You wouldn't. She hit a record. I just did. The confession went live within hours. Clips of Richard's outbursts spread across social media. His admissions, his anger, his desperate attempts to justify control. Stockholders panicked. News anchors called it the unraveling of the Cole dynasty. By sunset, the board demanded his resignation. Lena and Ethan watched the coverage from a park bench across the street. It's over, Ethan said softly. Lena shook her head. No, it's finally beginning. She rested her head on his shoulder as the sun dipped behind the towers her father once ruled. For the first time, freedom didn't feel like loss, it felt like oxygen. New York didn't sleep the night Richard Cole fell. The story of his downfall looped endlessly across cable news. Reporters camped outside his penthouse. Investors fled. His empire, the one he built to be immortal, was now just another cautionary headline. But inside his glass fortress, Richard wasn't watching the news. He was writing a letter. Meanwhile, Ethan and Lena had already packed their bags. The next chapter of their lives waited in Austin, where EcoGlow was thriving again, this time completely theirs. Let's go home, Ethan said, lifting their suitcase into the taxi. But Lena hesitated. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message, come alone. Last chance to understand. Ethan caught her expression. It's him, isn't it? She nodded. He wants to see me. Just once. Ethan took a slow breath. Then go. But don't let him rewrite the ending. Lena arrived at the Cole penthouse an hour later. The elevator doors opened to silence. No assistants, no security. Just her father, standing by the window, looking out over a city that no longer belonged to him. You came, he said softly. I wasn't sure you would. I came to say goodbye, she replied. Not to make peace. Richard turned, older somehow, the arrogance gone. Peace isn't something I deserve, he said. But you deserve to know what I built this all for. He gestured to a folder on the table, worn, personal. Your mother left you a letter. I kept it from you. I couldn't bear for you to follow her. Lena opened it with trembling hands. The words were simple, written in her mother's gentle script. Don't inherit my fear. Love doesn't need walls to survive. Let him go before he destroys you too. Tears blurred the ink. She whispered, "You kept this from me?" Richard's voice cracked. "Because she was right, and I couldn't bear to lose you the way I lost her." Silence filled the room. For the first time, Lena didn't see a monster. She saw a man built entirely from fear. "You thought control was love," she said quietly. "But love isn't ownership, Dad. It's trust." He nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. "And I never learned how to trust anyone but myself." She stepped closer, placed the letter on the table, and whispered, "I forgive you." Richard flinched, as if the words were sharper than accusation. "Don't," he said hoarsely. "I don't deserve it." Lena smiled faintly. "That's the point." She turned to leave. Behind her, Richard's voice broke through the stillness. "Lena, what will you do now?" She paused at the elevator. "Live. That's what you never did." Then the doors closed between them. Hours later, news broke again, but this time it wasn't a scandal. It was a tragedy. Richard Cole had been found unresponsive in his office. No foul play, no grand exit, just a note on his desk. It read, "Tell her she was right." Lena sat on a park bench as the sun rose, a letter clutched in her hands. Ethan joined her, silent. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stared at the skyline, at the tower that had taken so much, and now, finally, had nothing left to take. "He's free," she whispered. Ethan wrapped an arm around her. "So are you." A year later, EcoGlow had become a quiet success story. No investors. No billionaires. Just design, purpose, and heart. Their garage had become a studio, their home filled with light, literal and emotional. On a shelf in the corner sat a small frame. A photo of Lena, her mother, and a man who finally learned what love really meant too late. Ethan narrated One Last Time for the World, a documentary about their journey titled Built from Love. His closing words echoed through the screen. "We didn't build an empire. We built a life. And sometimes, that's worth more than any $1 billion could buy."